So one of the elder brothers, Ludwig, died in France. When he died in France, a French newspaper carried the headline. They thought that it was Alfred that has died. They did not know that it's Ludwig, not Alfred. So they now carried an obituary for Alfred, whereas Alfred is still alive. So imagine Alfred opening the newspaper and seeing the headline, "The Merchant of Death is dead." It's not often that you get to see your own obituary before you go. You understand? So Alfred saw the newspaper that said "The Merchant of Death is dead." So describing him as the merchant of death. So at that point, when he saw that obituary, which was the elder brother, not himself, but when he saw it, he felt that, how do I want to be remembered? If I go, will I just be remembered for making explosives, and all that? Is there anything he can do to cement his legacy, so that the conversation will not only be on he made dynamite and explosives? He needed to make a legacy, and that kind of laid the groundwork for him writing a will where he was to bequeath the majority of his fortune on rewarding people who excel in the sciences, literature, and in peace. And one other important thing that happened, Albert Nobel had a long-standing friendship with a prominent Austrian novelist and pacifist, Bertha von Suttner. So Bertha von Suttner came from a very prominent family. She's Austrian. She's a novelist. There was a point in 1876, Alfred was looking for a secretary housekeeper, for his residence in Paris. So this Bertha von Suttner applied for it and worked briefly with Alfred in that 1876. But then she went back. The reason why she took the job was she was to marry someone, one Suttner, and her family were against it. And so she kind of rebelled and went to do the work. But later she went back and secretly, quietly married the Suttner. So the interesting thing is Bertha von Suttner is a pacifist. She's a novelist, but she's a pacifist. Pacifists are people who are against violence, who are against war, and that is the opposite of Nobel. Alfred Nobel was making dynamite, was making munitions, was making money from explosives and things that we later use in war. Remember that Alfred wasn't really, initially, the intention was not for dynamite to be used in war. The intention was for it to be used in building, in construction, road constructions, and all that. That was the intention. The intention wasn't really for it to be used in war. But later, we know that the explosives was not being deployed in war. So, this former housekeeper, after they parted, they maintained communication. They maintained communication by writing, and she wrote a popular novel in 1889 titled "Lay Down Your Arms," and that novel was a huge success. So Bertha von Suttner was one of the leaders of the international peace movement. Why is this important? Because some have suggested that the reason why Alfred Nobel put up the Peace Prize is because he felt regret for the explosive he made and how it contributed to violence and wars and all that. So people thought that something that the Peace Prize was a way of him trying to make amends for that. But others have said, and this Encyclopedia Britannica and others, Nobel Peace Center, Nobel Prize Center, they've stated that there's no indication that Alfred regretted the things he invented. There was no indication that he regretted it, because at the time, Alfred was of the thought that scientists, discoverers, inventors are not responsible for what the items they discover are used for. So it wasn't like he was regretting, oh, that I made this, because the thinking then was that, according to Alfred, thinking in his days was scientists don't believe that they are responsible for if what they invented is now being used for something else, they don't feel a sense of responsibility for it. Some have stated that Alfred has written somewhere that he wished that what he discovered was used for peaceful means, which was the initial intent. But there's no real indication that he felt so much regret, and that is why he put the Peace Prize. Rather, the Peace Prize was more from his relationship with Bertha von Suttner. Bertha von Suttner, they communicated, they had debates. She was a pacifist, and then Alfred Nobel was really not a pacifist. At a point, Alfred Nobel felt that the more powerful the explosives it makes, that humans will feel so bad about the effect, and will not decide to stop wars. It's just like nuclear power. Some people felt that nuclear power when they have nuclear weapons, it will serve as deterrent to warfare and stuff like that. So Alfred may have thought that, the more high the explosive I make, the less likely people would want to use it. But he was wrong about that. That did not really deter people. Rather, the more the powerful the explosive, the more the likelihood that people will use it in warfare. But Bertha von Suttner was one of the leaders of the international peace movement at the time. She was a known pacifist, and she was well traveled, and she was well known. And that relationship between Bertha and Alfred Nobel likely influenced Alfred Nobel to include the Peace Prize. And interestingly, after he died in 1896, then the Nobel Prize distribution started in December 10, 1901, on the 5th anniversary of his death. Started in 1901. In 1905, Bertha von Suttner was the first woman to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So the gold medal that is issued when somebody wins the Nobel Peace Prize is one of the things that is written on the gold medal is the Latin "Pro Pace et Fraternitate Gentium," which is for the peace and brotherhood of men. So Alfred died in 1896. About a year before he died, he drafted a will. In that will, he instructed that most of his fortune be set aside as a fund for the awarding of 5 annual prizes to those who during the preceding year shall have conferred the greatest benefit on mankind. Quote from Encyclopedia Britannica. The 5 prizes that were established according to his will were the Nobel Prize for Physics, Nobel Prize for Chemistry, Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine, Nobel Prize for Literature, and Nobel Prize for Peace. And as I've said, the first distribution started December 10th, 1901, on the 5th anniversary of the death of Alfred Nobel. So it was initially 5 prizes according to Nobel's will. But then in 1968, the Bank of Sweden added an additional award. in economic sciences. It was named the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. It was first awarded, it was established in 1968, it was first awarded in 1969. In the will of Alfred Nobel, it stipulated 4 different institutions to award the prizes. 3 were in Sweden, 1 in Norway. So from Stockholm, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences awards prizes for physics, chemistry, and later economics was added. Then the Karolinski Institute, a medical university, confers the prizes for physiology or medicine. And the Swedish Academy confers the prize for literature. The Peace Prize is awarded in Norway. We have the Norwegian Nobel Committee based in Oslo. They are the one that conferred the prize for peace. After the death of Alfred Nobel, the Nobel Foundation was set up to carry out the provisions of his will and to administer its funds. Encyclopedia Britannica. So I want to talk about some people that have won the Nobel Prize. Okay. So this year I've mentioned Maria Corina Machado from Venezuela, who won the Peace Prize. 2023 we have Narges Mohammadi from Iran. She won the Peace Prize. The Peace Prize can also be awarded to institutions, not just individuals, institutions and groups. So like in 2020, it was awarded, Peace Prize was awarded to the World Food Program. And then we remember Malala Yousafzai from Pakistan, the young lady who was shot in the face and she survived. So in 2014, Malala Yousafzai, along with Kailash Satyarthi from India, Malala is from Pakistan, Kailash is from India, they were awarded the joint Peace Prize. Then in 2012, the European Union got the Peace Prize. In 2011, we have the Peace Prize was won by Lehman Bowe from Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former leader of Liberia, and the Tawakkol Kaman from Yemen. We have in 2009, Barack Obama, US President, won the Peace Prize. It was controversial at the time because it was said that it was few months after he got into office. So the people that were opposed to it felt that he had not done enough in office to get the Peace Prize, while the Nobel Committee suggested that it was to encourage the ideas of diplomacy that was espoused by Barack Obama. Interestingly, Donald Trump always makes reference to the Peace Prize that was won by Barack Obama. He has this envy. Anything that Obama got, he wants to get it. So Obama won it in 2009. It was quite controversial. There was a Kenya, Maatai Wangari. She won the Peace Prize in 2004. She was someone who believed in conservation, planting trees, to stem the tide of global warming. Then Jimmy Carter won the Peace Prize in 2002. That's the former US president. He won it after he left office. Years after he left office, Jimmy Carter was involved in a lot of projects, and efforts towards maintaining the peace. So he was granted the Peace Prize in 2002. And then in 2001, we have United Nations and Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of, I think he's from Ghana, late Kofi Annan, got the Peace Prize in 2001. And after the accords that was had, in trying to restore peace to Palestine, in 1994, we have the three people: Yasser Arafat, Palestine; Shimon Peres, Israel; and Yitzhak Rabin. They got the Peace Prize in 1994. Then that in 1993, Nelson Mandela and Frank F.W. de Klerk, or both South African leaders, at the end of apartheid, they got the Peace Prize. Aung San Suu Kyi of Myanmar got the Peace Prize in 1991. And we have Mikhail Gorbachev, former leader of the USSR, got the Peace Prize in 1990, with the efforts to bring down the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. In 1984, we have Desmond Tutu, the Bishop Desmond Tutu, Anglican priest in South Africa, that promoted non-violence means of ending apartheid in South Africa. Then our very own Professor Wole Soyinka won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986. We have Mother Teresa winning the Peace Prize. She was from India. Peace Prize in 1979. Amnesty International won it in 1977. Then we have Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States. Martin Luther King, leader of the Civil Rights Movement, won the Peace Prize in 1964. Then before Desmond Tutu, in 1960, the Peace Prize was won by Albert Lutoli. He won it in 1960, but it was not until 1961 that he collected it. He was the president of the African National Congress, and he too promoted non-violence, although it was shown that he later died from forces that were apparently linked to the apartheid leadership at the time. In 1954, Ernest Hemingway won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Then we also have 1953, Sir Winston Churchill, UK, won the Nobel Prize in Literature. And then in 1921, Albert Einstein won the Nobel Prize for Physics. Maria Curie won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2011. While some years before that, in 1903, the husband, Maria Curie, Pierre Curie, and Henry Becquerel, they won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1903. So Maria Curie won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1903, then in Chemistry in 1911. The Peace Prize was also won by former US President Theodore Roosevelt in 1906. Then, from the very first year of the award, we have Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen, who won Nobel Prize for the discovery of X-ray. So that is the Nobel Prize. The interesting thing with the Nobel Prize is, remember that Alfred Nobel, he was quite rich and had a lot of assets. Before he died, he had no children. He was not married. And Some of his family members were hoping that when he died, they were going to inherit, you know, some of his vast assets. And they were all surprised when the will was read. The will of Alfred Nobel was read in Stockholm. He deposited the will in a bank in Stockholm. When it was read, it was a surprise. And some even thought that the will could not be carried out. But with the establishment of the Nobel Foundation, and they were able to follow through, and it's been more than 100 years since 1901 that the Nobel Prize have been awarded continuously every year, except during the period of World War I, World War II, when it was difficult to get information on who, because there's a process. There's a very rigorous and diligent process. First, like what they do is that for next year now, around September, October of this year, they'll start collecting nominations for the Nobel Prize of next year. So, and when it gets to certain deadline this year, certain deadline, early, I think the deadline is in January of the year of the award. Those nominations will be considered, and you have committees, that will now select who the winner will be. It's the most prestigious award, across the world, and many people look forward to either winning the Nobel Prize or hearing who has won the Nobel Prize. So Alfred Nobel lived quite an interesting life, and we saw he had the fortune or misfortune of seeing an obituary of him where it was said that the merchant of death is dead. And he now thought of it, what kind of legacy would he want to leave behind when he dies? And he decided to leave a legacy where those who are proficient and those who use their knowledge and skills to the advancement of physics, of chemistry, of physiology, or medicine, literature, peace, that they are rewarded for it. The why literature? Because Alfred Nobel had interest in literature. He wrote poems in English and in other languages, even though most of which were not published, but he had interest in literature, and he was, of course, he was a chemist. He had to use a lot of physics, and he was interested in sciences, and then we have physiology, medicine, and then peace. It was as a result of the influence of Beta Sotna, somebody who worked with him, and they became friends. She was a novelist and a pacifist, and then he included the Peace Prize, likely, based on the influence of Beta Sotna, and not really because he regretted making those explosives that he made, because he wasn't a pacifist himself, even though he had hoped more that the things could be used for peaceful purpose. But he lived in an era where scientists did not believe that they are responsible for what their discoveries, inventions were used for, and so he could not have regretted making those things. But he left a good legacy, and you can also think about the lessons from it, and think about what kind of legacy would we leave behind. Would we follow the example of Alfred Nobel? Of course, not all of us will have the kind of wealth, the kind of access that he had, or the kind of knowledge and exposure that he had. But in our own little way, we want to leave a legacy of living an impactful life, or making a difference in the lives of others. That will be something that is worth thinking about.